Hi, seniors. So we have more about commas this time. And I want to tell you some times that you need to use commas and sometimes that you don't need to use commas. So, because some of these things can be confusing, there are just things that you need to memorize and maybe you'll understand why as you are doing them. You do not need commas in these 5 cases. There are other places, of course, that you don't need commas, but when you're joining 2 or more very short sentences like this, he came and he left, you really don't need a comma there. Stylistically speaking, you might want to put a comma there if you want your reader to sort of pause there, he came and he left, you know. But grammatically, you don't need comma there. You don't need a comma when you have a series that has and between each item. So he brought turkey and dressing and cranberry sauce and sweet potatoes. Yes, I'm thinking about Thanksgiving. But if you were to write that series of things without the ands, then you would need commas there. But if for some reason, again, stylistically, you want to put and between each one, you don't need to put a comma with the ands. The next one says, after short introductory prepositional phrases. So if they're really short like this, 2 or 3 words, maybe 4 in some cases, you don't need to put a comma there. Like, after lunch, we'll watch a movie. We don't need to say, after lunch, we'll watch a movie, like with a pause there, not necessary. Between a prepositional phrase and a verb. So this is with the inverted order sentences. Right there in front of me stood the king. Even though it's a long double prepositional phrase, I don't need a comma after it. Yeah, and I can't think of a time when you would want to put a comma there. The king is the subject, okay? Stood is the predicate. Right there in front of me is an adverbial prepositional phrase. So if it were in the normal order, it would be the king stood right there in front of me. But yeah, no comma needed there. Between an adjective and the noun, it modifies. So she had long brown dreadlocks. We don't need to put a comma between brown and dreadlocks because that is an adjective and a noun. Yeah, not necessary. In fact, don't put a comma between an adjective and the word it modifies. It's confusing and just wrong. Oh, one I forgot to put on there. Don't ever put a comma if you have a subject and a verb right next to each other. Don't ever put a comma between the subject and the verb. So like here, after lunch we'll comma watch a movie. Don't do that. Yeah. Don't separate the subject and the verb with just a comma like that. Never. Okay, on these bottom ones, you do need commas. You do need commas in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 instances. You need a comma after a transitional word or phrase. And the example I gave here is, in the first place, you should always, whatever, but in the first place is a transitional phrase. Even if you just put the word first, you need a comma after the word first. Any kind of transitional words or phrases, including conjunctive adverbs. Those can be called transitional words or phrases. Here I have a whole sentence with the conjunctive adverb in the middle. They may never eat in the morning. They never eat in the morning. Rather, they wait until noon. And so you have the semicolon before and the comma after the conjunctive adverb. Conjunctive adverbs can also be used as transition words at the beginning of sentences or beginning of paragraphs. So if I'm going to the next paragraph, I could say, therefore, blah, 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 you know. And so I'm kind of using the therefore, which is a conjunctive adverb, as a transitional word. So after an introductory interjection, so like, well, that was long. Whenever you say well like that, it's called a mild interjection, and it needs a comma after it. Also like, yes, I know. Okay? Many times in chat, you would put yes, I know, and you don't need to put a comma in chat. But the formal, technically correct thing is to put a comma after yes, after no, after well, after oh no, and different things like that. Introductory interjections. After an introductory adverb. Here's the example. Unfortunately, the lights went out. Also, introductory adverb clauses. So, if you leave me, comma, I will cry. If you leave me is an adverb clause. You should know that from years past. If the adverb clause is at the beginning of the sentence, taking the place of just an adverb, then you do need a comma. If it's at the end of the sentence, like, I will cry if you leave me, then you don't need to put a comma. Let's see. Around parenthetical expressions. So these are things that interrupt the flow of the sentence, like this. This is, I believe, the end of the storm. Okay? So, also, conjunctive adverbs can be used in that way. This was, however, the end. Okay? So these are parenthetical expressions. They need a comma before and a comma after each one of those. After introductory participles or participial phrases. So here's a participle. I shouldn't have. It should say participles. Sorry. Sighing, he closed the door. Sighing is a participle, and I'm using it to modify the subject here, and we always put a comma here. One reason for that is, so let me give you another example just off the top of my head here. Looking around, the cat decided to pounce. But as you're reading the sentence, if there's no comma after the word around, you're going, looking around the cat, wait, it's confusing. So you need to have the comma there for clarification purposes. You'll probably see an example of that, or at least one, probably more than one example of that in your work, of times when you have an introductory element that if you don't put a comma after it, or if you put a comma in the wrong place, it's confusing. So, understanding his words, she still felt hesitant. So this is an introductory participial phrase, and it needs a comma after it and before the subject. Okay. Normally, those are adjective phrases, and normally you don't need a comma between an adjective and the word that it modifies. But if it's a participial phrase or a participle, then that's an introduction to the sentence, then you do need a comma. After introductory prepositional phrases, okay, this should say long. Go ahead and put long there. After long introductory prepositional phrases, or two or more prepositional phrases. Sorry. I'll fix it and I'll put a picture of it right. So here, at the long anticipated birthday party, the guests awaited their host. Okay, this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words long. There could be prepositional phrases that have a lot of words. 10, 15 words. But they need to have commas after them. So right before the subject, they're the guests. On top of the stairs to the office, the Christmas tree looked elegant. And so here we have, it doesn't look as long, but it's double, so it does need a comma there before the subject as well. Hopefully this will help you with doing your work, and happy writing.